Hey guys, welcome to the channel. So today we're going to go over the basic operation of your Lippert Level Up system. We have a 6-point system on our Keystone, Montana, and recently we had some issues with it, and while I was online last night doing a little bit of research to see if anybody else had had these issues and maybe what they did to rectify their issues, I started to notice that there was a lot of basic questions on there about the operation of this system that just keep repeating themselves. So for whatever reason that people aren't familiar with their system, I'm going to go over the basic operation with you, and then at the end I'll go over some of the issues that we just recently had, and then maybe some things that you can do as preventative maintenance and hopefully avoid those issues with yours as well. So stick around and we're going to go over this. So first of all, let's just go over what some of these buttons do, and then we'll get into the actual operation of the system. So obviously you have a power button here. Front, rear, left and right, obviously they're going to operate those locations of those jacks. So let's power this up. And so you've got your auto level button, your retract button, enter, and so here the up and down button on the left hand side, you're going to be able to scroll through some of the menu options. So we'll scroll up, and first of all that'll take us into manual mode, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. To go into manual mode, and then you just hit enter after you get to that screen. If you scroll up, auto retract. Now this auto retract is going to retract every single jack, all 6 of the jacks at the same time. So once you get into that mode and you hit enter, the function is going to start. So just make sure that you're either on your truck already, or because it's going to retract the front jacks as well. So if you're not on anything and you don't have the front of your rig supported, the nose is going to nosedive. So just be aware of that. Okay, and as you scroll through, this is just going to give you the degrees as far as where your coach is as far as level goes. The front obviously is down just a little bit here, and you're going to scroll from side to side, and then you're going to scroll up one more, and it's going to give you the volts in your battery. And while we're talking about the battery, a lot of times I see people post questions or concerns that while they're operating their system just shuts down and they get an error code. And that could be due to low voltage, because this system needs the 12 volts to operate properly. So if you drop below that in your battery, you may get those errors. So that might be the first thing you want to check if you're getting errors and the thing is shutting down through operation. Another thing that can cause that error code is the fusible or the breaker switch, or the breaker fuse as some people call them. A lot of manufacturers will install a 50 amp breaker or a 50 amp fuse for that. Lippert recommends between 50 and 100. So a lot of people have had this problem, and if that kicks out, obviously if you wait a few minutes and it cools off, it'll kick back in and you can resume operation. What Lippert recommends is replacing that 50 with an 80, and I'll try to find a link. You can buy these on Amazon or auto parts stores or places like that. I think I probably bought mine at Amazon. When we owned a Cougar a few years back, it had an electric system, and we typically had that problem, and it was that 50 amp fuse that was causing the problem. We replaced that with what I thought was a better quality 50 amp fuse, and that fixed the problem for that. When we bought our Montana, it was late in the fall, and I did have it happen one time in colder temperatures, so I just automatically switched mine to the 80, and I haven't had a bit of problem since then. So let me give you a look at what that looks like. And so I would recommend, if your manufacturer, whoever it is, install the 50, go ahead and get an 80 in there and just save yourself a headache down the road. Okay, as you can see, actually I have 2 in here. This one's actually for our 12 volt compressor refrigerator, but this is the actual 80 amp fuse that we installed. Basically just take the 50 off and replace it with this, and you shouldn't have any issues after that. So let's go through. The coach is already on the truck, so in order to get it off the truck, obviously I'm going to extend the front jacks and bring them down. And you can hear the motor running, and now you can see it's starting to lift off the truck a little bit. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop the camera here. I'm going to go ahead and take it off the truck so we can go through the whole auto level mode, and then we'll go through some of the features. So now that I have the coach off the truck and the truck pulled away, the next thing you're going to do is, number one, make sure that your jacks are positioned in a place where they're going to come down on something solid. So whether you're putting blocks or pads underneath there, we use snap pads, but sometimes we do use some blocks under ours. So once you're ready to level up, basically you push and hold the auto level button, and you'll see the coach, especially if you came off of your truck a little bit high, the front end is going to go down first, and then it's going to start coming back up. And you may notice that I have bubbles installed on my coach, and some people ask me, why did you put bubbles on your coach if you have an auto level system? Well, for two reasons. Number one, when I get to a campsite, before I even come off the truck, I look at those and see how far off level I am to know whether I might want to put boards under my wheels or maybe reposition the coach to something a little bit better. As the coach goes through the system, you'll see that it stops for a second and reanalyzes. And what you also see here are lights flashing to indicate that it's going through its system. And as it's going through the process, you might see, like right now, the red light is flashing on the left. That's telling me that the left side is still low, and now you can see it's coming up. And so it's going to analyze again. And now it's going to bring the front back up. And it's going to analyze again. And now you hear that beep, and it'll say auto level success. Now typically what I'll do is double check my bubbles and see, and in most cases they're right on. Now the second reason that I put the bubble on the front and the side for side and front to back was because from time to time this thing might get out of calibration. And that's one thing that we're going to go over right now. I'm going to show you how to recalibrate this. It's very quick, very simple, and that, like I said, is why I put the bubbles on. So if I have to level it manually, if it's done with its system and it says it's level and the coach is truly not level, I'll go into manual mode, hit enter. Now I'm in manual mode, so now I can operate the front up or bring it back down. And I can bring the right side up or the left side up, whatever I need to do while I'm in manual mode. So what I will do is I'll get it all leveled up, and I'm going to do that to make sure it is level, because I'm going to calibrate it right now for you. So I'm going to bring the front up just a bit. My bubble is right on. I'm going to check the side to side, and the left side needs to come up a little bit, since actually, I think it was the right side that needed to come up. There we go. Right side needs to come up just a little bit more. Okay. And as you can see, it'll show you that it was at 0. So my front needs to come up just a skosh more. When it was done with the self-leveling, it was on. Okay. Now my bubbles look really good. So what I'm going to do to recalibrate now is just shut the system off and push the front 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I'm going to push the rear 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And what will happen is you'll see all this happen. It'll say 0 point, and then I need to just press enter to set it. And it's going to tell me to wait, and it was successful. So now we're completely recalibrated. So, and what could cause that? Well, let's face it. when we get bouncing down the road, guys, if you travel a lot and you get onto some rough roads, it could possibly take it out of calibration. So that is that feature. Now, what this system also has is a memory so that it'll take you back to where you took it off of your truck. And how that does that, or when that calibrates that, or when that memory kicks in, is when you hit that level button, auto level button. So wherever this coach is, before you hit that level button is where it's going to take it back to when you go to re-level your truck. So all you do to go to that mode is push your left and your right at the same time, and it's going to take you right back and stop to where you took it off the hitch on your truck. Now, one of the questions that I see come up on these forums a lot is, I hit the left and the right to go back to my truck, but it said that function was not available. That's probably because you came off of your truck below level or low on the front end. If you're at level or above level, that's when that feature will work. If you come off of your truck and your front end is low, that feature is not going to work. So now that I've gone to where I put the truck back, or put the coach back on the truck, the next thing is obviously to back the truck back under the hitch, and I'm going to do that right now, and then I'm going to show you guys how to bring everything up all at once instead of bringing everything up manually. Now that the coach is hooked back up to the truck and it's locked in place into the fifth wheel plate, what we can do is go back in and scroll up. One, past manual, go past manual mode, you'll push it twice, and it says auto retract, and we can hit enter. And now all of the jacks are going to retract at the same time. And if you listen when all of them come up, it will stop itself when everything's up, and then what usually I will do is take a walk around the coach to make sure that they all came up all the way. Sometimes one of them might not come up all the way, and then I'll have to retract it manually, but that doesn't happen very often. Sometimes in cold weather that happens. Okay, and right there at the end, you'll hear the pump labor a little bit, telling you that it's bringing them up, and it's bringing up enough pressure to bring them up and hold them up. And again, it'll go back to not level, jacks up, and as long as you're locked into place and your hitch and everything's plugged in and you've done your pre-trip and your walk around, you're ready to pull away. So you basically just shut it off, and if you forget to shut this off, it's not a big deal. It'll time out after a little bit and shut itself off. So that's the basic operation of the panel. Hopefully that answered some questions for you guys. Now we'll talk about these knobs down here. If you have just one switch that operates more than one slide out, which we do, we have a Montana 3120, and the living room slide outs, the opposing slides operate on one switch. So what you have here, sometimes you might be in a rest area, or there might be a reason you don't want to open both slides. You can shut one off and open just one at a time. And this is one of the questions that I see resurface a lot as well. So that's what these valves are for. They're marked DS, which stands for door side, and ODS, which stands for off door side, or what I call the service side of the coach. So if I want just the slide on the door, off door side, or the service side, or the driver's side, as some people call it, just that one to open up, then I just turn this valve off, which is the door side, and then when you operate that switch to open up your slides on the inside, that one will not open. Same thing for the other side. So if you're in a rest stop and you want to operate just one, it's very simple. And then just don't forget when you get to your campsite to make sure that these are both in the on position, and you'll be able to see those because you're going to level up first. Okay, let's talk about some of the questions that I see resurfacing on these forums regarding the hydraulic system on these coaches quite a bit. One of them is people are always asking, do I need to have the coach leveled to operate my slide outs? The answer is yes, that is definitely recommended. If you're in a rest stop somewhere and you're fairly level and you're just going to open it up a little bit, it's probably not going to hurt anything and you're not really going to have to put the jacks down. But it's definitely recommended if you're setting up and you're going to fully open up that you have your coach leveled first. And we do the same thing in reverse. Tina and I have a system. I mean, I take care of all the outside stuff. She takes care of all the inside stuff. And she really knows by the sounds that the hydraulic system is making, or if she hears it beep and she knows that it's leveled up, she's free to open up all the slides and do her thing on the inside. And again, when we're breaking down to go home or to move, I wait until she has all the slides in, and then I'll go ahead and hook up and bring the jacks up. So yes, you definitely want to be leveled. Otherwise, what can happen is you can get these slides out of alignment if you're too far off level when you're operating them. So just be careful with that. Another question that I see quite often too is, can you use these jacks to lift your coach? For example, to change a tire or something like that. The answer is yes, you can. But it also goes back to that old saying, just because you can doesn't mean you should. The jacks really aren't designed or created to lift the coach off the ground. They're designed to stabilize the coach. You can do it in a pinch if you've got to pull a tire off quick. You can do it. Here's what will happen though. If you're out on the road and say you're just bringing down one side, the jacks on one side, if the coach gets too far out of level, they'll time out and they won't work. So you may have to bring one side up a little bit to bring the other side up just enough to get the wheels off the ground to get the tires off. And that's another question. If you're on a very unlevel site, is it okay once you level and hit auto level if the wheels on one side are off the ground? Well, it happens, and it probably happens more often than people realize. For a couple of reasons, I would say don't do that. Try to put some boards or some kind of a block underneath the wheels. Number one is safety. Before you take this coach off the truck, you're going to want to make sure that the wheels are chucked, and it's kind of hard to chuck the wheels if they're off the ground. So for that reason, that's why I always try to make sure that there's some kind of a surface underneath the wheels that I can get a chuck under. Really how this system works is it basically is just supposed to take the pressure off the axles to stabilize the coach. So you don't want this thing rolling away, hitting your truck or rolling down into the lake or whatever. So make sure you get your wheel chucks. So that's, like I said earlier, another reason why I put the bubbles on. When we park on a site and I get out of the truck to survey the site, that's one of the first things I look at is the bubbles. And I can tell by how far off they are if I feel like I need to put something under the wheels on one side or the other, just for those safety reasons. So again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I don't recommend that. Some people will argue that point with me, but the folks over at Lippert say the same thing. You really shouldn't do that for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're putting too much stress, undue stress on that system, and it's kind of a safety issue. So I would say no, don't do it if you can avoid it. Okay, another thing to keep in mind when you're using the auto reconnect feature on this is it's going to take it back to wherever you took it off, the height that you took it off, or the height that it's going to be at when you hit the auto level button. That's where it measures it from. What I've noticed on mine is sometimes I still come in a little bit too high when I reconnect. So you'll get a feel for yours. If you're new at this, or if you're not new at this, you already have a feel for when your coach and your hitch come loose, when you can take that off. I typically will stop raising my coach when I'm disconnecting from the truck when I just see a little bit of movement. And how I gauge if I'm at the right height when I'm going to reconnect is if the truck lifts up a little bit as I come off, because I want my hitch to come in just a little bit low and ride up on the plate so that it comes up. Otherwise, if you come up too high on a lot of these hitches, like the Reese hitch, there's a bar in there that's kind of like an alignment bar, and if you get that thing bent because you came in too high, you're not going to be able to close your hitch all the way. And yes, I'm talking from experience, so you could strand yourself somewhere. if you don't hook this thing up properly. So just keep that in mind. And as you're backing up, one thing Tina does is she knows where that level is supposed to be, and she watches that close as I'm backing the truck in to make sure it did line up properly. So just keep that in mind, and you'll get a feel for that. Like I said, if you're new, where you need to come off and what you need to feel, and you'll get a good feel for that the more experience you get. So just keep that in mind. So now let's talk about some issues that you may run into and some maintenance things that you should be aware of with these systems. I want to say they're almost maintenance free, but they're not. There's some things that you have to keep in mind that could cause you some problems down the road. So let's get into those. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about maintenance, or preventative maintenance, if you will, for your system. It really kind of is almost maintenance free, but it's not. There's really not a lot to it as long as you keep up on it. So number one, it's a hydraulic system, so obviously it takes fluid. That's going to run your slide outs that are hydraulically driven, and it's going to run obviously your hydraulic cylinders for your leveling system. So you want to make sure that you maintain the proper level of fluid. Now, when I was on the phone with Lippert, I asked them, I said, my reservoir doesn't really have any markings on it, so what's full, what's not full? And his answer was, as long as the fluid is about an inch below the top, that's full. You don't want to take it up any higher than that. And when you want to check your fluid is when all of the cylinders for the leveling system are up and all of your slide outs are in. So I'm going to show you that. I'm going to get in here with that and show you that. Keep in mind that my front jacks are down, so this is going to be mine's going to show just a little bit low. With just the two cylinders, it's not that big of a difference. So I'm going to get in there and show you that. And you can see mine's a little further down than an inch from the top, but keep in mind that my front jacks are down. If I put this back on the truck and bring the jacks up, you can see that crease, that top crease there in the reservoir, that's about where my level will go. Okay, so in regards to your fluid levels, another question that I see people post is, or I have seen post is, I've got my coach leveled, so all my jacks are down, and one slide came out just fine and the other slide came out 3/4 of the way and then stopped. Well, that could be a number of things wrong, but the first thing to check obviously is going to be your fluid level, because if your fluid level is low, it could be low actually for one reason really. You probably have a leak somewhere. But if it is low, what's going to happen is it's going to suck air, and then it's not going to continue to build pressure and push that slide out all the way out or the cylinders all the way down. So what you're going to want to do is if it comes back in, obviously is get everything back on the truck, bring everything in and look at your fluid levels. If those are low, probably what's happening is when you get to that last slide and it's out of fluid, now you've got air and it won't build pressure. So the easy thing to do obviously is add fluid. Okay, so another thing, even though this system makes everything so easy and so convenient for you, there's always that one little thing that makes something inconvenient or slightly inconvenient. And for me, it's the fact that this door on our Montana has a lock on it instead of just a wing to open and close it. And I know for good reason that there's a lock on there to keep some smart aleck or some kid from getting in there and doing something and screwing things up. So I decided not to change that out for that reason. So I got really kind of tired of going back to the truck to get the key or saying, hey babe, you got the keys? So what I did, I just ordered some extra keys, and for two reasons, and I'll show you the second reason in a minute. One is so that I can keep the key close by here, so I just put it on a little carabiner and I just clip it on to the loop on the LP bottle there, and it's always right there and I can get to it. It's not going to open anything that I have to worry about as far as somebody stealing things or anything like that, so it's nice to have that there. And while we're here in this compartment, I'm going to go off subject just a little bit. For those of you that might have watched some of our videos of our return trip back from Florida, last winter you saw that I lost the keys and we got locked out of the coach. So I fixed that problem so that if that ever happens again, we have an emergency set of keys. And that, what I did was, I'm going to bring the camera in real close here so you guys can see it. I put in one of those real estate lock boxes and screwed it to the frame. It has its own combination so that I always have an emergency set of keys. So if something crazy happens and you lose your keys and the coach is locked, we typically travel with our deadbolt locked, so we don't have to worry about anything popping open going down the road. So if that happens and I lose the keys again, they're right there. So I'll give you a close-up look of that. And hopefully you guys can see it. There it is. It's just bolted to the frame, and the door comes down. You put in the combination, and I got a complete set of keys, not only for the door but the compartments and everything hidden in there. So no more locking ourselves out. So that's just one little bonus tip for you. So okay, we're going to get to the problems that I had with our jacks or our cylinders, and I'll go over what happened there and what we did to rectify the problem. Okay, so let's talk about an issue that we recently had with our coach. We were all packed up, the coach was hooked up, ready to go. We had a couple more things to do. I came out to put some water in the system so that we had some water for the trip on the road, and I happened to notice that this jack was in this position that I have it in right now, halfway down. And at first I thought, well, maybe I just didn't hold the button long enough and bring them up. So I ran the jacks up, didn't think too much more about it, did what I was doing to get ready to finish up, and about 3 minutes later I look and it's in that position again. So now I'm scratching my head and worrying about whether we should go or not. So I did call Lippert, and I did look online at some people's posts about this same issue, and there's a couple of things that could cause this problem. Number one, we could have a bad seal in the cylinder. We could have a leak in the system somewhere. So I went around and I checked every cylinder. I checked up at the pump, no leaks anywhere, so we were able to rule that out. And so there is a way that you can troubleshoot this and try to isolate what the problem actually is. What causes this is obviously this system is under pressure all the time, whether the jacks are down under pressure to hold the coach stable, or it's under pressure to hold the jacks up in place. So somewhere pressure is being lost, obviously, for this jack to drift down. This was the only jack doing it, so we needed to figure out what was causing it. So one way to troubleshoot that or isolate whether it's a bad jack, why that jack is bypassed, is you have two lines that connect into the top of these cylinders. There's a black line, which is for the pressure down, the downward pressure to hold it when they're in the down position, and the orange line, which is the retraction pressure to hold them up. So it could be that it's not even this jack that is the problem. It could be somewhere else in the system. It could be the jack in the rear rather than just this mid jack. So what you do is you take the orange line off of this particular jack that you're having a problem with, and you want to hold that line between this jack and that jack is the one you want to take off, because it could be that jack causing the problem. So what you do is you take that off, and you're going to need a second person. So you're going to have your truck hooked to your coach, or your coach on the truck, so all jacks can be in the retract position. And then you're going to want to have somebody hold the retract button, the rear retract, so that you can see if fluid comes out of the port on this jack, it's likely this jack that's the problem. And a word of caution, don't put your face anywhere near that, because if that stuff comes spraying out and you get that in your eyes, you're going to do that one time and that's it. But anyhow, if the fluid comes out of the line that you took off that goes back to the rear jack, then likely it's that jack causing the problem. So you can at least isolate which jack is causing the problem if it is in fact that particular jack. So that's an easy way to isolate that problem. And these are all connected in a loop, so you could have to go from jack to isolate the problem. Okay, so when we were troubleshooting and trying to isolate what the problem was with that particular cylinder or that particular jack drifting down. I disconnected that orange hose between that one and the rear one, and now again all of the jacks were up. I had to have the coach on the truck. All the jacks were up, and Tina pushed and held the retract button, the retract rear, and sure enough the fluid came out of that particular cylinder, which told us that cylinder was causing the problem. So, you know, we have an extended warranty, so right away we got on the phone to try to schedule service. The reason I was going to go that route, that is a really easy fix. Just about anybody can do it themselves. You just got the bolts to take off, to drop that cylinder off the frame, and then you unhook those fittings off the hydraulic lines and then change out to a new cylinder. The issue with that with us was we have an extended warranty with a $100 deductible, so that's all it would cost us to change that. If I didn't have the extended warranty, I would probably have just done it myself. The cost of one of those cylinders, depending on where you get it, is going to be fall somewhere in between $500 and $600. So it was kind of a no-brainer for us to just get it into an authorized service center and just pay the $100 deductible. Fortunately, though, we didn't have to wait to get it into service. We did schedule it, or try to schedule it for service. As a lot of you guys know, right now that's kind of a nightmare trying to get your coach in for service. We let it sit for a couple of days while we were waiting for the service center to call us back to get scheduled. I did do some reading online. I ran the jacks up and down several times. It still drifted down. After it sat for a couple of days, for whatever reason, I'm stubborn. I went out there, ran it up and down a couple of times, and it stayed up from that point. At one point while I was running it up and down, it seemed like I could hear some popping in the jack. So I put in the fork oil, and it's been holding ever since. So after calling Lippert back, we both agreed probably what happened in our case is there might have gotten some debris in there which caused that cylinder to go into bypass, and somehow that debris was loosened up and now it's not causing a problem. So we're going to see what happens. So that leads me to another thing as far as your preventative maintenance. In the conversation with the guys at Lippert, and by the way, those guys are superior. If you have to call Lippert with a question, what I would recommend is that when you call them, you have a piece of paper and a pencil ready to take notes, because they're going to throw information at you just right out of the gate, and they're going to diagnose that thing. And if they can't, they'll get you somewhere where you can get it fixed. But if at all possible, they're going to walk you through some things, some diagnostics, and hopefully get you up and running and on your way. But again, have a piece of paper and a pencil ready, because these guys know their stuff and they're going to start rattling stuff off to you. So with that said, our problem kind of fixed itself after we put the fork oil in. And I'm going to put a link. I'll show you guys. We used what's called fork oil, and I actually ordered mine off of Amazon. I think it was like $15. I mean, you can get it. Just shop around. You might be able to find it at your local auto parts store. If not, just get online. You'll find it. I put a quart in, and you can get like cat stiction fluid. I think that's another one that Lippert recommends. But the fork oil is that I'm going to give you the link to is kind of the most common that everybody uses. That's going to do a couple of things. It's just going to kind of keep things lubricated, keep things moving, and kind of help prevent that popping that you may or may not have experienced already. We only experienced the popping one time, and it was in cold temperatures. That while we were traveling to Florida, we overnighted. I think in Kentucky it was like 20 degrees that night. We did hear it a little bit. And then on to some preventative maintenance. In order to try to prevent some of that debris from getting it up into them seals and into the system and causing a problem like that, what they recommend is just wiping down the cylinders when they're out, especially if you're in an area where there's a lot of dust or maybe down in the coastal areas where there's a lot of salt in the air. Gravel dust is a bad one. If you're in an area where maybe you're parked next to a dry gravel road or something like that, and there's a lot of dust being kicked up, before you run those jacks back up to travel again, just take a clean rag and start at the top of the cylinder. And I'm actually gonna get down here and do the front ones here and show you guys. Lippert does not recommend that you use any kind of cleaner, so don't use anything like brake cleaner or anything harsh like that on them, because that can damage them seals and then just cause you more problems with leaks and things like that. So they basically recommend don't spray anything on the cylinders. Just use a dry clean rag and wipe them down and start. Okay, I'm going to wipe down these front jacks because obviously these are the ones that are down, and I'm going to use a white paper towel just so we can see just how dirty they actually are. To look at them, they don't look bad at all, and they don't look dirty. But so, like they said, you want to wipe down from the top so that you're not pushing any debris up into those seals that will drag that debris up into the system when you bring the jacks up. So I'm just going to wrap it around and then and you can see the black that's in there. I mean, it's not too bad, but there is quite a bit on there. So this is something that I'm obviously going to be doing now that I've had an issue, to try to prevent any of those issues in the future. Alright, so let's get this thing wrapped up. As you can see, this system is really not that intimidating or not that difficult to operate. I can see where if it's your first RV with an RV level system or an automatic level system like this, it could be a little intimidating at first, but it really is quite simple. The instructions on our Montana anyway are right below that, so if you run into trouble, if you're a Keystone owner, the instructions are right there. And hopefully this video just kind of helped you see and walk you through some things, and maybe show you how you can just get through the whole system real quick, real easy, and how it really makes setup and tear down just real simple. As far as the maintenance goes, obviously just watch your fluids, check for leaks, keep the cylinders clean. That's something that I really never thought about before until I had a problem, and probably a lot of you are the same way. So I'm going to be keeping those wiped down probably just about every time I run them back up, just to hopefully prevent the issue that I had in the past. One more thing about that, if you do have one drop like that and you're on the road or you need to get going somewhere, you can kind of use a ratchet strap or something to hold it up, but you may also create a secondary problem by doing that. In fact, it did happen to us, and the guy from Lippert did warn us it could happen. So if you strap that up, there's still going to be pressure on that, pushing down on that, and that strap's going to get really tight. And what could happen is it could start pushing another cylinder down, and it did just that for us. So if you are on the road and you have to get somewhere, what you could do as an alternative is unbolt that cylinder from the frame and just turn it sideways. Now, keep in mind, you want to turn that sideways so that if it does extend any further, it's not going to extend out and hit your tire or something like that. I know you're thinking, yeah, no kidding, Captain Obvious, but you know, when we're on the road and things are going wrong, you kind of get tunnel vision. So just keep that in mind, that you want, if that's going to extend anymore, extend away from a tire so you don't cause even more problems. So for those of you who may use this as a reference, just remember to please subscribe to the channel so you can find this video pretty easy if you do need to go back and reference it. For those of you that have been asking about the truck and some of the modifications like our fuel tank and things like that, that have been asking for a video, I promise I'm going to get to it. So keep an eye out for that. And those of you that might be interested in the newer product lines and things like that, and maybe some of the new features coming out, we are heading in a few days over to Elkhart, Indiana for the first annual Keystone Ambassadors Rally, and they have a lot of cool things for us to do as far as the service visiting the service department there at Keystone, some of the new features. So we're going to be taking the cameras along and hopefully sharing a bunch of new information with you guys and some exciting products coming out from Keystone. So thanks for watching, guys, and I hope this video was helpful to you, and we'll see you on the next video.